an interview in Belgrade from 2013, Professor of Linguistics David Crystal argues that there are many world Englishes, as everyone adapts English to their own needs, interests, history, actions, and it only requires weeks to develop a new English. These new Englishes are culturally influenced. Every aspect of culture, myths, legends, flora, food, folklore, song, dances, politics, institutions are reflected in the spoken English. So there will always be a certain flavor in local English speaking which can be understood. So as Dr. Poyraz Kolluoğlu said in the expert conversation video, you each have your own precious language. Can you identify anything that is specific to your culture and not observed in other English speakers from around the world? What about me? Have you noticed different gestures and uses of words when you listen to me? Let me share with you an experience from many years ago when I first went to Russia for some research. I was invited to an English language classroom by an English teacher I had met through a relative. She wanted her students to have a real experience of speaking English. There I was, asked to spell my name to the students. In Turkey, despite my name starting with a Turkish C, pronounced as G, I would spell my name as C-E-M-R-E. But the teacher told me I was spelling my own name wrong and corrected it, pronouncing D-Z-E-M-R-E. And further, when I met with people from different places, they have come to spell it in many other different ways in English, with a J, with a G. But changing the way I write my name was not something that I had anticipated in an English classroom in Russia. And having studied many years of English, I had thought this was very insulting for the teacher to tell me I didn't know how to spell my own name. Though she was putting an effort to protect the children from getting confused by a different local English learning culture. That was when I recognized how cultural identity determines the style in usage of English. And therefore, English speakers from different backgrounds communicate effectively. It is the hidden barriers that are based on differences like the values, beliefs, mindsets, attitudes, sensibilities, prejudices, and preferences that also determine how we communicate. In Unit 4, you have heard a diverse set of students talk in different accents in English. Some were talking faster, some slower, some were looking directly to the camera, while others were looking around the room to other international students. Some were holding their hands, some were moving them. Some were moving their eyebrows up and down, giving them a totally different image, sometimes of more self-confidence and sometimes lack of it. All of these differences are fueled by cultural underpinnings of speaking in English. In Turkey, speaking English is seen as a very prestigious thing, and most of the time, Turkish English accent is seen as someone's inability to learn the language. Due to their different accents, the Turkish students believed all the international students spoke perfect English, while there was not a native speaker among them, and they had all chosen words that felt most comfortable for them. As they will be part of a project on diversity on campus, their diversity was what we wanted to reflect on, so we didn't ask them to say specific things. Have you noticed some of them using various non-word fillers such as while trying to talk about themselves, nothing like an expert speech which required a jargon? Have you noticed the change of tones in their speech? What about their clothing, their postures, body language? Did you realize any subcultures reflected in the way people presented themselves? What cultural elements have you noticed in their speech? How about in other interviews? Did you notice the different gestures among different interviewees? Remember that gestures are used to give an accent to complement or to contradict to a verbal message, sometimes to regulate interactions and sometimes to substitute verbal messages. I asked Luni, our Erasmus student who likes football, what was the most interesting gesture she had noticed in Turkish people. She said the gesture that replaces no in conversation. I remembered that the first anthropology course I had taken, our professor had told us how he had trouble getting a taxi when he had first arrived to Turkey with luggage in his hands. In his culture, raising his eyebrows meant yes, while in Turkey it was observed as a no. I just showed you how he meant. So all the taxis moved away without disturbing him anymore, while he had to put everything in his hand down to wave a taxi to take him. Similarly, you would hear that in some cultures, for example in India, shaking your head to the side means a yes, while in most others, it's a clear no. We can increase such cultural examples, but let's look at the key difference in communication through a different lens before we wrap up this unit. The cross-cultural differences rely heavily on the culture, if a culture is more direct or indirect. In countries like Japan, Greece, and Arab nations, people tend to be more indirect. For example, it is very hard for them to say no. They speak one another in an orderly, linear fashion. When they have disagreements, it is personally threatening. Physical space is considered more communal. Standing very close to others is a common practice. Speakers often talk around a point instead of directly to it. Time spent to do something is not important. The outcome of learning from it is. Such cultures are categorized as high-context cultures. Low-context cultures, on the other hand, are more open and direct. In low-context cultures, words are highly valued, disagreements are depersonalized, privacy and personal space are highly valued, verbal messages are explicit and direct, speed is valued, how efficiently something is done is important. United States, Germany, and Scandinavian countries are considered low-context countries in cultural communication. So in this unit, we have learned how linguistically diverse we are, even when we speak the global language of communication, English. The way we communicate through language is heavily influenced from the culture we grew up in, or the context we are talking in. These can be based on physical reasons, for example, our linguistic disabilities, or the way we have learned to integrate our bodily moves to speech, such as culture-specific gestures we use. It is important to remember that we are all speaking a unique language, but some of us speak it more directly to say whatever they need to say, and some of us are using it within a higher context, indirectly trying to make the others feel what we are trying to say.